Let's look at how the dust is settling in Paris this morning with Annelies Borges, who's there for us. Good morning, Annelies. Will the Yellow Vests be satisfied by Macron's speech yesterday?
Well, that is a very good question. Good morning, Belle. We're not going to see one announcement being made on the part of the Yellow Vests. This is a movement that is very fluid. Up until now, no real leader has emerged. They have a few spokespeople here and there. But the people I have spoken to, the Yellow Vests I have met over the last few days, have told me that this is not enough. They used the expression "c'est des miettes." It's the leftover that Macron is offering them, and they believe the French president has much more to give.
Annelies, how supportive overall are French voters of the Gilets jaunes?
Well, Belle, recent polls suggest that 72% of French voters actually understand the movement and support the Yellow Vests against 23% that believe that Emmanuel Macron is actually doing a good job. So put it this way, and Emmanuel Macron is not exactly winning here, but he has made some significant concessions this time around. He has made these announcements and come forward with concrete measures that will have an impact on purchasing power, on the lifestyle of a lot of people here in this country. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays with the rest of the population that is not necessarily taking to the streets. The government estimates that there are some 10,000 people who have actively joined the Yellow Vests. That is a small chunk of the population indeed. So it's going to be interesting to see how Emmanuel Macron's message echoes throughout France. But what is important to note is that he's done one thing right. He has really worked on his tone. We have speaking about how Emmanuel Macron's personality has been part of the problem in this crisis. Many protesters have told me that he was arrogant, that he was too detached from their reality. Well, yesterday he was almost apologetic, saying that he heard their anger and that he understood while some of them may have thought that they were not his priority.
At the start of a new day in Brexit, we're going to Westminster and Tig Enright. Good morning to Tig. How has that delay gone down in Westminster?
Well, good morning to you, Belle. I think we heard it there in Evelyn's report. It's despair on all sides. Of course, exactly what type of despair probably depends on what Brexit camp you're in. But there was huge criticism for Theresa May in the House of Commons from all parties about her strategy to walk the country all the way to the edge and then step back. Criticism, too, from the Speaker of the House. But as we heard there, Theresa May saying that actually MPs have to realise they share in some of the responsibility for Britain being at this stage. And of course, for now, the political stalemate continues. But there was one other interesting voice in all the political circus that we saw yesterday, a voice we really haven't heard at all anything from of substance over the last 2 years. David Cameron has become quite the political recluse since he left office, having lost the referendum, the big gamble the biggest gamble that ended his political career. But he says at this stage he still has no regrets.
Calling a referendum, Mr. Cameron? Mr. Cameron,
you don't? Because I don't regret calling a referendum. I made a promise in the election to call a referendum, and I called the referendum. Obviously, I'm very concerned about what's happening today, but I do support the Prime Minister in her efforts to try and have a close partnership with the European Union. That's the right thing to do, and she has my support.
Where should Britain go?
Well, Theresa May has now gotten away from this political circus. She's headed off on a whistle-stop tour of European capitals, trying to get their support, some concessions. I think she might get a more sympathetic ear from them, but that doesn't mean that they'll give her what she wants or what she needs.
And it's not just Theresa May's deal that she's trying to save, it's potentially also her political career, her leadership. Where are we on that leadership challenge?
I think on that front, the stalemate goes on. There's two ways in which Theresa May's career could be toppled. There's a motion of no confidence in her government, which Labour had threatened had she lost the vote due to take place today. They said they won't do that now because most likely they haven't got the numbers. And then there's the rebels within her own party who've been agitating throughout this whole process. But they too don't have the numbers to trigger the process in which she would have to defend her leadership. And of course, they have to pick their moment wisely, not least this, because removing Theresa May would be hugely disruptive to this whole process where time is pretty precious. And if they take that gamble and lose, well, then the constitution of the Conservative Party protects her from any further leadership challenge for a further year. So the fudge continues.
All right, thank you very much, Ty. It's been 4 decades of a long journey, but now the Voyager II spacecraft has finally bid farewell to our solar system, and it's entered the realm of the unknown. Well, it launched to explore the far reaches of the sun's orbit. It's the only probe ever to visit Uranus and Neptune, and it becomes only the second human-made object to enter interstellar space. Luke Barber has that story.
To infinity and beyond. That is the fate of NASA's Voyager II probe, which left Earth in 1977. After more than 41 years floating through space, it has become only the second human-made object to leave the solar system. Now more than 18 billion kilometers away, it no longer feels the solar wind that characterizes the heliosphere, a protective bubble of particles and magnetic field created by the sun. After crossing the edge of the sphere, which extends beyond the orbit of Pluto, the probe will now drift eternally through this new, unexplored domain of interstellar space.
I think it was always a dream, but not something that they necessarily thought they could get accomplished. I mean, think about this. These spacecraft have been flying for 41 years. They're both still operating. The original mission was a 4-year mission to Jupiter and Saturn. Voyager 2 was fortunate enough to be able to go not only to Jupiter and Saturn, but also to Uranus and Neptune, and continue on another 28 years past that point, past that Neptune encounter, to reach it now out into interstellar space.
The craft leaves the heliosphere 6 years after its sister probe, Voyager 1. Launched to examine the outer planets, Voyager 2 encountered Jupiter and Saturn, and is the only spacecraft to study the ice giants Uranus and Neptune on its journey. The pair's plutonium power sources will eventually stop supplying electricity, at which point their instruments and their 20-watt transmitters will die. Then they will drift forever through the space between the stars.